Today's video is part 2 of the Comic Theorist submission to my Pokemon Theory contest, which consisted of how humans had created all Pokemon. But a lot of people had some pushback and some feedback. They said, what about prehistoric Pokemon? And especially, what about legendaries? How can humanity create legendary Pokemon? Well, in today's theory, we're going to discuss just that. And because this is a contest video, this individual could win $100 if he gets the most likes on it. So you know what to do, vote with those thumbs up, and let this guy know if he deserves that $100 prize. Now, without further ado, let's jump into today's video about how humanity created legendary Pokemon like Arceus.
Welcome back to part 2 of this theory. If you haven't seen the first part, I highly recommend it as it explains where we were about to go. So I've read your comments. But Proto, what about Arceus? But Proto, what about prehistoric Pokemon? Well, there's a perfectly logical explanation for all of this, but let's recap what we've learned so far. The Pokemon world is a distorted version of our Earth. Real animals existed in this world at some point, but have since become extinct. Pokemon creation seems to be tied to the experiments performed at the Pokemon Mansion and in Cinnabar Island in general. We also deduce that moon radiation is the key to Pokemon evolution. We've also noted that for some reason a lot of Pokemon could learn the attack Toxic. It would make sense for all poison Pokemon to be able to learn this attack, but why do almost all Pokemon learn this via TM? Doesn't it seem almost jarring to see Pikachu spitting out venom at another Pokemon? Well, to understand how this is possible, we must first understand what a TM is. In the games, it looks like a disc. These discs are placed onto a Pokemon, which brings out the physical potential for that specific Pokemon to perform that move. Although it's never specifically stated in the games, it's obvious that this is working in tune with that Pokemon's genetic code. If it wasn't working with their genetic code, then it would simply alter their DNA and force the Pokemon to learn that specific move. But TMs are either compatible or incompatible with the Pokemon's gene pool, and for some reason Toxic is compatible with most. This theory is further evidenced by the fact that newborn Pokemon learn TM moves if their parents know those particular moves. So essentially, almost every Pokemon could be born with Toxic. Somewhere down in their prominent genes, all Pokemon have a single poison Pokemon ancestor in common. If you saw the last video, then you know exactly which one I'm hinting to. Grimer. The toxin that every Pokemon seems to have in their DNA is what may have infected all animal life on Earth and transformed them into the pocket monsters we know today. With Grimer, these toxins were able to flow through water streams, and with the inadvertent creation of another Pokemon, it actually became airborne. Coughing is essentially a Grimer that is exposed to extreme heat, forming into a ball of poisonous gas and thusly turning this Pokemon toxin airborne. As Coughing, this Pokemon toxin went everywhere. The only two regions that don't have Coughing or Wheezing already have a Grimer and Muck available. So this infection is literally everywhere. The extreme heat part of Coughing's origin is actually really interesting because Cinnabar Island supposedly had a volcanic eruption, and that's the reason why the Pokemon Mansion was burned down. The Grimer in the mansion turned into Coughing and helped spread this disease. Just to be incredibly clear, a volcanic eruption would not have left the Pokemon Mansion in the condition that the player finds it in any Pokemon game. This is because the eruption is actually a cover-up. If this was a volcanic eruption, the mansion would have been charred to ash, and whatever is left would be locked into molten rock. What would actually make the most sense is that the Pokemon experiments got carried away, and in an effort to cover up their tracks, the scientists burned down the Pokemon Mansion and then staged the volcanic eruption, hoping to have contained their Pokemon experiments. This backfired on them, and they inadvertently made it airborne via Coughing. So what were the Pokemon scientists trying to hide? With Mewtwo's creation, it's obvious that they were trying to create godlike Pokemon, legendary Pokemon. That's right, they were trying to create all legendary Pokemon. But what proof do we have if they burned down the mansion? Mewtwo obviously being Exhibit A, and thankfully Exhibit B and Exhibit C also survived. Vulpix and Growlithe. Being that these two are the only first stage evolutions to exist for a mythical Pokemon and a legendary Pokemon in the wild, they are the key to tie this whole thing together. Their first stage evolutions are meek and hapless, but their final form Pokedex entries were setting them up to become the next wave of legendaries. The sudden escape of Mewtwo caused them to get careless, and in burning down the mansion they left behind the most damning evidence. Coincidentally, the next time we encountered a burned down building in the Pokemon series, it just so happens to be the location of all Gen 2's legendaries. Maybe this was all a coincidence, or maybe not. These scientists' experiments caused an outbreak of a virus that killed off all animals and inadvertently created a new invasive species that may eventually cause Armageddon. In an effort to mask it as a positive thing, they began implanting these legends of Pokemon for those who are willing to believe in myths and legends. And for the scientific-minded skeptics, they had another plan. Another Pokemon lab was opened in Cinnabar Island. This time, they were tasked with having to prove that Pokemon have always existed. There, they created a process to create fossilized prehistoric creatures and bring them to life using a process much like they did in Jurassic Park. Except instead of using frog DNA, they used Pokemon DNA. So what about Arceus? Did they create Arceus at Cinnabar Island? No. Was he created by mankind though? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we were there. We witnessed it. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, we are introduced to a Pokemon known as Type Null, who later evolves into Silvally. This Pokemon has very obvious resemblances to Arceus, or Arceus, with a mysterious system built in called RKS system. Silvally was never meant to be a Pokemon that resembles a god. He was meant to be a god. What I'm saying is that Silvally will eventually turn into Arceus, existing outside of time, space, and reality itself, thus creating a paradox and the legend itself. And you were there to bear witness to the birth of the creation trio. And at this moment, Arceus altered the world into the Pokemon world we know, with memories of Earth as we know it subtly fading away from existence. And we were there for all of it, erasing any and every plot hole. And now we finally have a reason as to why we are able to capture God itself. Because he was made to be a Pokemon.